second monthly coffee. Nice turnout this morning. Thank you for coming. My name is Don Fraser. I have the honor of being the chairman of the Waukee Chamber. Let's see, dignitaries to welcome. Supervisor Mark Hansen has asked us for a few minutes at the end of the meeting. So, Mark, thanks for joining us for the entire meeting. Thank the police officers for being here. Tim Mormon, City Administrator, in the back. Tim, thank you for providing the facility. And with that, you can come to listen to me today. We'll open with some remarks by Rob and Charles, and then we'll open it up to questions. As always, we know that people have thoughts that are very passionate about some things that they have. We do ask that if you have a statement, you keep that rather brief, so we can lead to a question that the legislators can respond to. And we've got a lot of people usually that have questions, so we like to keep the conversation moving and not just focus on one particular person. So your cooperation in that area would be much appreciated. With that, gentlemen, who gets to go first this week?
Sure. Again. Hi, thanks again for coming out this week. My name is Charles Schneider. I'm the state senator for District 22, which includes Clive, Waukee, Windsor Heights, all of the Dallas County portion of West Des Moines, and part of the Polk County portion of West Des Moines. I was just reelected in 2016 and am just starting my second term in the legislature. I serve on the Appropriations Committee. I'm the Appropriations Chair. I also serve on Judiciary and the State Government Committees and the International Relations Committee. And I thought what I'd do is just talk a little bit about where we are in the legislative process right now and talk about a couple of bills that are of personal interest to me, and then end my time and turn things over to Representative Taylor. So last Friday, March 2nd was, or 3rd, was the conclusion of our first funnel deadline. And that's the deadline by which a bill has to pass out of a standing committee in either the Senate or the House. The next funnel deadline is March 31st, 3 weeks from yesterday. And that's the deadline by which a bill that has passed out of one chamber has to pass out of a standing committee in the other chamber. So right now, both the House and the Senate are busy debating bills to send them over to the opposite chamber to keep them alive for the final deadline and for the legislative process. Next Tuesday, we will see what the Revenue Estimating Conference projects revenue will be for fiscal year 18, which will be important for us for setting the budget for that fiscal year. They may also be revising what they anticipate the revenue for fiscal year 17 being. So that could have an impact on the budgeting process as well. I don't know what they will show yet, but and I'm hopeful that they will project an increase in revenue, but I'm preparing myself for that not to be the case too. Just given the way things have gone the last few times the Revenue Estimating Conference has met. A couple of bills that are of interest to me and that are still alive include medical cannabis and asset forfeiture. We've got there are a couple of medical cannabis bills that have survived the funnel deadline. There's a different one I'm working on in the Appropriations Committee. The Appropriations Committee is not bound to the funnel process. The bill that I'm working on in the Appropriations Committee is a little bit broader than the two bills that are currently alive in the Senate and in the House. The bill in the Appropriations Committee would expand the number of conditions for which medical cannabis could be used. It would allow for the production of medical cannabis in the state and also for distribution of medical cannabis in the state. This is a bill that I believe we will get strong bipartisan support for, and that we will be able to pass hopefully within the next couple of weeks and send over to the House for their consideration. The asset forfeiture bill increases the burden of proof required for seized assets to be forfeited to the state. And it's a bill that we've had a subcommittee meeting on and that is passed out of the Judiciary Committee in the Senate. We're continuing to work with interested organizations like county prosecutors and law enforcement organizations find something that will be workable and that will pass approval among our members in the Senate. I don't know if there's anything alive in the House right now on that issue. I don't think that there is, but I'm hopeful that we can pass it over to, pass it out of the Senate and over to the House relatively soon.
What does that mean?
There's,
Can you give an example?
We'll
I
have
don't
questions
understand
in a
what
little
that
while.
is.
Ma'am, we'll have questions in just.
so an example would be if law enforcement stops someone who has a large amount of cash, might be shrink wrapped and placed or hidden in the car somewhere. They suspect that it is proceeds of criminal activity, and they can seize it and then eventually forfeit it to the state. But there are certain requirements that they have to follow, and the burden of proof isn't necessarily always on the defendant, and the threshold can be low given the circumstances. So it would make some changes to that process. But the intent is not to make it more difficult for law enforcement to do their jobs and to intercept criminal activity. It's just to make sure that innocent owners of property have their rights protected. And another bill I'm working on relates to domestic violence. It's a companion to a bill that's passed out of the House, or that's still alive in the House, and it would increase mandatory minimums for repeat domestic violence perpetrators. Under certain circumstances, it would require that they take a risk assessment, and if that risk assessment shows that they would still be a risk to the public, then they'd be required to wear and pay for GPS monitoring. So those are just a few things that I'm working on that are of personal interest to me. I'll end it there and turn it over to Representative Taylor, and then we'll look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Senator Schneider. My name is Representative Rob Taylor. Most of you, I think I know in this room, just for a few that may not. I serve in the House. This is the beginning of my third term, so this is the 5th year in session for me. I serve as Chair of Ethics Committee in the Iowa House. I also serve as Vice Chair of Health and Human Services Budgets Committee. I also serve on the Full Appropriations Committee. Human Resources, or what we used to call Health and Human Services, and I also serve on Transportation. I'm just going to fast track a little bit so we can get to all of your questions today, because I know the last time the Waukee Forum, we ran out of time, didn't get to answer all of your questions. So with your permission, I'm going to just tell you a few things that I'm working on, individual bills that are important to me, and then what I'd like to do is yield the rest of my time to your questions if everybody's okay with that. Everybody good?
Absolutely.
Perfect. A few bills that I've been working on this year. Number one, I've talked to a couple of you in regards to student loans and student loan debt. 2 bills that I've been working on that are still alive in the House and hopefully moving to the Senate. Number one is a taxation at death. So right now, if your student loan, if you die, your student loans are forgiven, as long as you have not consolidated with your spouse. However, the state of Iowa, if you die, treats that death as a taxable event and will tax your estate or your surviving spouse for that as income. I don't think that's right. I don't think that's fair, and we're working very hard to change that law. In addition, I've also worked very hard the last couple of years and introduced a bill again this year that takes all of the caps off student loan interest that's paid on student loans in the state of Iowa. Right now there's a $2,500 cap on the interest that you can deduct on your Iowa student loans, or on your student loans in general. And there's also an income cap on that. So if you make, as a combined couple, more than $165,000 a year, you can no longer deduct any interest off of your student loans. My point is simply this: if we can deduct the interest on our mortgages on our homes, we should be able to deduct the interest on our student loans. And I think that that is a great recruitment and retaining device for the folks in the state of Iowa. It will help retain high-income, high-debt folks, and it will also help recruit people from other states to stay in our state. On a lighter note, I always say this, I also introduced a bill this year that makes the honeybee the state insect in the state of Iowa. Believe it or not, we do not have a state insect in the state of Iowa. Some folks laugh at me and say, why in the world are you doing this? Don't we have more important things to do? We do, but this is a very important and close thing to my heart when it comes to identifying pollinators in the state of Iowa, honeybees specifically, all of the rest of the contiguous states around us, with the exception of Illinois, have already claimed the honeybee as the state insect. And there may be some opportunities for us to be able to pull down some federal dollars from the federal government if we identify the honeybee as the state insect. There's a couple of other items that I've been working on this year as well. This one has been a little bit controversial within my own party and my own chamber, which if any of you know me, that's okay with me, that's fine. But I've been very passionate about outlawing tanning in the state of Iowa for minors. My bill is specifically for anyone that's under the age of 17. Not that I'm necessarily opposed to tanning in general, but what we have found is that the evidence is overwhelming that chronic tanners literally breed chronic tanners. And my bill specifically says anyone under the age of 17 or 16 and under will no longer be allowed to tan in the state of Iowa. There's a few other things that I'm working on at the moment, but I can talk to you after the fact. I'd like to, with your permission, reserve the rest of my time and yield it to you for any questions that you may have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, gentlemen. First hand I saw. And we ask you to use the microphone because this session is being taped. It'll be available through chamber website afterwards, and to be able to be heard on the tape, you need the mic. So.
Thank you, Mr. Frazier. Appreciate taking the time to be up here. Thank you, Rob and Charles, for your service to Iowa. I got a couple issues I want to talk about. I'm a Waukee resident, taxpayer, and absentee voter. My vote wasn't counted in the last election. Take great pride in voting. You have a perfect voting record for decades now. Somehow or another, my vote wasn't counted in November, and it seems like that issue's been swept under the rug. I'm hoping that there'll be an investigation on that. I've called the county. I've talked to Julia Helm, county supervisor, secretary. I talked to her. I left a message for Mark. He hasn't called me back. He's sitting in front of me. That it really makes me angry. I'm trying to be polite. I know it's not your fault, but it seems to me like with the voter ID law, that ought to be a priority to try to figure out how absentee ballots weren't counted. I don't care who you vote for, vote, and whoever wins, wins. That's fine. That's our way our country operates. The other issue I have is on-time school funding. I'm a Waukee School District taxpayer. This issue's been around for years. The funding for the school district is, I don't know the right terminology, it's a year late. So the state funding for our students is based on numbers from last year. I would think that the state of Iowa, we've done a good job in Waukee for economic development and growth. We've got a lot of good things happening here, and I'm very proud of that. But we're getting penalized because we're paying more in education tax dollars because the state's not giving our students their fair share of funding on time. And those are a couple of issues that I think need to be addressed. The school funding thing has been years, probably decades now. Fermenting and sitting on the back burner, no action. And please don't just try to be nice to me like I'm being nice to you. No, that's probably the wrong way to state it, but tell me what you're going to do.
Good question.
Don, thanks for the questions. Like you, I don't know if my vote was counted in the last election because I also voted absentee. I have reached out to the Secretary of State's office and the Attorney General's office to see what can or should be done. They are doing their own investigation right now. I will find the most recent email communication I've had with them and share that with you. There's nothing confidential in that email. It's probably time for me to ask for an update on that too, because I haven't heard anything back from them in a couple of weeks. But that's an issue that irks me too. I vote in every election, so does my wife. We usually vote absentee, and I want to know that my vote was counted. everyone has that, everyone has that right, whether you're Republican, Democrat, Independent, whatever. It's inexcusable. So that's something that does mean a lot to me. I'm going to continue to look into that and see what can and should be done. As far as the on-time school funding, I agree that's an issue that we need to address somehow. If I had an easy answer, it's something that probably would have been done already. I know that the School of Waukee is, we're effectively, the number of students that don't get paid for by the state is about the equivalent of a rural school district. It's, I think, 500 or so students, plus or minus, every single year. Now, the people who will fight against that are the people in small school districts who would lose out on money because they have declining school populations. And that probably would be most of the people in the state legislature. Waukee is not an anomaly, but it's one of the small number of school districts in the state that's experiencing the growth that it is. I know that Representative Landon and Kester last year and Taylor looked for ways to try and provide more accurate on-time funding. But for those of you who don't know, what Don is talking about is school districts are funded for the number of students that they certified in the prior school year. So in the 16-17 school year, we have, I don't know how many students in the Waukee School District right now, but for the 17-18 budget, they're only going to get money for the number of students that are in the schools in this current fiscal year. Next fiscal year, we know they'll have about 500 more students, and they're not getting the money for those students. So I know it would be tremendously beneficial to Waukee to be able to have those resources, and maybe Representative Taylor can fill us in on the efforts that were done last time.
Excuse me, what happens to the declining schools in that same scenario? Do they still get the same amount of money that they got last year?
They do. So effectively, they'll be getting money for more students than they have enrolled during that fiscal year.
Yeah, so it's an inverse issue. So Don, back to your question on voter ID, I'm right there with you. Actually, I voted live in person this year, but my wife voted absentee. She had the same issue and concerns and problems and anger and frustration that all of us have had. I know Senator Schneider wrote a letter. I went down and talked to the Secretary of State personally. You know, in Dallas County, the former gentleman is not there anymore. We've got Julia that's dealing with it. I know, Tyler, you've reached out to them. We've got letters from many of you in that. We're on that, and we agree with you wholeheartedly. And your point is very well taken. And I'm not trying to be nice. I'm just saying I'm as angry as all of you in regards to the situation. So we do know there's an investigation going on between the auditor's office right now, Julia Helm, and the Secretary of State Payton's office. The outcome of that I don't know, but I can tell you that we'll continue to put pressure on them because obviously Dallas County is right at the forefront of this issue. So in regards to school funding, I think what you're going to find, at least with the bill that we passed this year in the House, is that we're required to address school funding within 30 days. I give you my word to work my tail off to make sure that happens in the future. That was part of the bill that we passed early on in the session. In regards to the funding model, when it comes to where we're at, we're usually between 500 and 700 kids behind in funding. When you attribute that to money, that's anywhere from $700,000 to $1 million a year that we really can't access every year. So this year, myself, Representative Kester, Representative Landon introduced the bill. House File 24 is the number on it. And what that bill specifically does is address the disparity in what we would call temporary funding for growing school districts. And really, there's only a few of them out there right now. Waukee, we're proud to be, again, still the fastest growing school district in the state, I think. But Ankeny's having the same disparity right now. And there's a couple of others that would qualify that would just be able to allow us access to appropriate that money temporarily so we don't have this constant gap in which we can't access needed money. So House File 24 is the file number on it. Look it up. If you can't get it, I'll be more than happy to email it to you. but I know that that is still active, it's going, and I do know that there's an appetite to get that through the House this year, and I would hope that we could have the same support in the Senate.
Thank you both for coming. I'm referring to your newsletter that you sent out yesterday, and I would suggest everybody subscribe to Senator Schneider's newsletter. And you talked about Senate File 274 on computer science. And I'm really grateful that you're talking about that, and because I think it's really needed. And unfortunately, some of the small schools can't afford it. So anyway, so therefore, because the businesses have asked for it to have a better workforce, hopefully that will make it a priority in the Appropriations Committee to actually fund it, because it takes a lot of money for upkeep on computers, let alone buying a rotation on the computers in all the school districts. And then also asking the businesses to pay more taxes since they're getting a taxpayer-funded workforce. Will you be in support, both of you, in increasing funding for computer science?
Yes, Julie, I don't know if we'll be able to fund any for fiscal year 18, to be honest, just depending on what the Revenue Estimating Conference comes back with. But I think in fiscal year 19, we should have room to allocate some money toward that fund that I referenced in the newsletter. It's something we need to do. This is where a lot of new jobs are occurring. They're good paying jobs, and there's a shortage of supply of students in Iowa to fill these jobs as they're becoming open. So it is going to be a priority for me to find funding for moving forward. And the other issue you mentioned was the
Increased taxes.
yeah, increase. So the way that I think we ought to start looking at that is by taking a look at the tax credits that we provide, economic incentives that we provide to companies right now, and start peeling some of those back. I am supportive of doing that, and I know that both the Senate and the House Ways and Means Committees are taking a look at that.
And in that, to that degree, also, you may or may not be aware, but at least on the House side, we had a joint meeting this week, both of Appropriations and Ways and Means, with a presentation on all of the tax credits individually. And we are reviewing each one of those tax credits right now to see, number one, if they're viable, number two, if they're beneficial, and number three, if we as the taxpayers are getting benefit from those tax credits. So that is actively being reviewed right now. Back to your original question on computer sciences, I absolutely support it as well. The good news is, though, is as technology advances, when it comes to computer technology, when we're replacing those computers now, they're cheaper than they were. So cost is coming down, but it is one of those issues that I continue to put at the forefront. I think it's our 21st century issue in educating our workforce. And I'll definitely, as I said on the appropriation on the House side as well, do my darndest to try and find a funding model that will work to continue to support and expand that.
Along with that tax credit, I hope that as you're looking at the tax credits that you will emphasize the tax credits that corporations get as opposed to the earned income tax credits. The national way of going things right now is just sort of take away from those at the bottom, and I certainly hope that we would not reduce the earned income tax credit for people that are just getting along. My other comment is that since public school funding is so tight, and we've been talking about it here, I hope that this new amendment on an ESA amendment on, is it Senator Sinclair, to put in ESAs, I hope that that won't go through. Public school funding is sort of the backbone of America, and 92% of Iowans are educated by public schools. I don't want my public dollars going to fund private schools. But if a person wants to send their child to a private school, that's fine. They have that prerogative. As long as I don't pay for it, they pay for it. So public funding for schools, really important. The more the better.
Thank you. My focus on the tax credits is going after the economic incentives that we have, the sales and use tax credits and the income tax credits. My focus is not on peeling back the earned income tax credit. And as far as the
ESA.
yeah, thank you. ESAs. I'm still working on my coffee here. As far as the ESAs, there just is not money in the budget this year to fund those. That doesn't mean that this won't come up in future years, but as for this year, there's just not the money for it.
Are you for ESAs or opposed?
Generally I've been in favor. I think competition is good for public schools. I think competition makes people better.
I'm not sure where you stand on that.
Yeah. We'll give you bigger signs next time.
Mr. Taylor.
You know, I think
I wanted to conclude that though by saying I've seen the polling data on that, and I understand that there, even among Republicans, the percentage of people who oppose ESAs outnumbers the number of people in favor of them. So that will factor into any decision I make on that issue going forward too.
am I up?
You are.
So, you need to understand that myself, my wife, all of our kids are all products of public schools and proud products of public schools. So, I went to Lincoln High School on the south side of Des Moines. My oldest, as well as my wife, I won't tell you what year we graduated because then my wife would get upset. But my oldest daughter graduated from West Des Moines Valley High School. My youngest daughter graduated from Waukee High. And then I've also got two other boys that are in Waukee High and South Middle School now. So I am an advocate for public schools.
Thank you.
That said, this is the other side of it that you probably won't like. I'm also an advocate of private schools as well. If there is an affordable model that moves ahead in which we can fund an ESA that brings some competition to other school districts, we don't have that issue in Waukee. There's other school districts that need competition. If there's a funding model that makes sense and that we can fund without putting public school funding at risk, I'm for it. But I don't think that we're going to get there, at least while I'm an elected official. So if that tells you kind of where I stand at this point in time, I don't see that we have the funding in the next 2 to 5 to even 10 years to be able to appropriately fund ESAs, but also continue to fund public schools to the level that they need.
Thank you very much. Hello. Looking around the room, I'm 21 years old. I'm probably the youngest person in this room right now. So yeah, I would say I'm probably a millennial, and I have a very unique perspective on this. And when you guys use the word compete, that makes me very concerned. As you probably are well aware, a lot of my people in my generation hate the idea of capitalization and competing. And I've gone back and forth on this, and to me, when you use the word compete, I look at it like a football game. You know, football is a competitive sport. There's two sides. There are two people fighting each other. And when you use the word compete, to me what I hear is that someone is always going to lose. So when you say that a school, you want to fund ESAs, you want a school system that competes against each other because you think that'll make them better, I don't like that idea because it sounds like you want someone to lose. So I hope that that influences your opinion on that a little bit, and maybe you can reflect on it a little bit more. I'm not hoping to change your opinion 100%, but that's just, you know, in my millennial head, that's something that I thought was a very valid argument to me. That swayed my opinion a lot on it. Thank you, sorry.
No, don't apologize. Thank you for sharing that. And that, for me, when I say compete, I don't mean that I want this to be a zero-sum game where there's a set number of losers. I think competition can be healthy in that it forces people to get better at what they do. And in other districts where they've had competition, that has helped schools get better and make improvements. So,
can you give me an example?
You know, I've heard reports on NPR about districts. I can't identify them on the top of my head. I could do some research and find something for you if you want to leave me with your contact information.
I'll answer it in this way.
Okay.
When it comes to where we are in central Iowa, whether it be West Des Moines, Waukee, Van Meter, Adel, Des Moines Public Schools, we've got some damn good school districts. And they're competing already.
Because we have open enrollment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But if you go about 55 miles south of here right now, of a small town that I grew up between here and Osceola, you look at Clark County Community Schools right now, not to pick on them right now, but they have a 68% literacy rate in their school. 68% literacy rate.
Yeah.
That is a situation that if I were a parent in Clark County School District right now, I'd probably be looking for opportunities that I could send my kids to get a better education.
Mm-hmm.
Not because they necessarily have bad teachers. I don't know the situation out there, but I do know the statistic, and it's sobering. So I think as a parent, I think that it's very important when we end up in a situation like that where we may have a school district that is floundering, frankly, that you as a parent and you as a student should have the opportunity to look for other better pathways.
So would it be like a situation where it'd be two schools in that area, essentially splitting up the district? I mean, I don't understand how you would compete in that scenario.
Well, in all due respect, I'm not sure that you understand.
I not entirely know. I understand ESAs enough to the point where it's like, you know, it's each individual is supposed to be a set amount of money. They're supposed to get a set amount of money. Each student, essentially.
As a non-football player, okay, I appreciate where you're coming from when it comes to competition, but I don't look at competition necessarily as a bad thing. What I think competition does, at least in commerce, for example, in private sector business, competition generally makes things better. It allows a product to be delivered at a cheaper and better fashion. It usually gives consumers better access and better availability to a better product. Competition in the private sector generally is a good thing. But I also am very, very familiar with the restrictions when it comes to trying to put competition in education, when it comes to private and public sector. I just, more than anything, I want to make sure as a parent and as a student that you, my constituents, have the best choices available to you to get the best education that your kids can get. That's what we try and do.
So I'm trying to understand, like, how are you trying to get by?
Microphone when anyone is speaking, or it will not be recorded.
Okay. So what I'm trying to understand, again, I mean, I'm young. A lot of these things aren't communicated to me as well, I guess. So I'm sorry if I'm embarrassing myself by asking dumb stuff.
You're not at all. Not
Okay.
Don't undermine yourself.
But sorry. How are you making more options available in this situation? Like, if you're a student in that community, how are more options being made available?
Well, I don't think I need to explain that again, because I think at least in the one school district that I represent, that's not an issue. I use the example of a school district that's got a 68% literacy rate. If I were a parent or a student down there, I would be looking for other ways in which I could get my children enrolled in an education that performs better than that, frankly. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
They may move, David. They may move, or there might be an opportunity for a private school to start in that particular area. All I'm saying is competition in certain circumstances is a good thing, and I'm going to continue to advocate for that. But also, to your point, ma'am, I'm not going to advocate to the level that it would hamper our good public school system that we have currently in the district that I represent.
happened to the school in Park
There
County?
has
that
to
just
be
had
a
meeting?
microphone to ask a question. Thank you.
What would happen to the school in Park County that you mentioned, where these students, 68%, and the other group are going to move to some other school to get better education, be it private or some other public school? What happens to that school that they're all bailing out?
Personally, I don't think there would be another private school pop up there. I think in a situation like that, we would need to dedicate more resources to reading and some other things.
Right.
Okay, next question, and I forgot when I did the intro, if you would please introduce yourself where you live.
Courtney Clark. I live here in Waukee. So on ESAs, just briefly, overall, what I want to ask about today is about facts have to matter, and how do they matter. So referencing the studies that you discussed, multiple nonpartisan studies have been done on ESA and voucher programs across the country, and they have found that ESAs or vouchers do not result in improved educational outcomes. The very few examples of increased graduation rates either happened in districts where the voucher schools were held to the same standards as public schools, which nobody here is saying they're going to do, or where voucher schools were allowed to kick out underperforming students. Those are the two things that resulted in improved educational outcomes for those students. So in most cases, voucher students performed the worst after moving to, sorry, I lost my place, to voucher schools than they did in public schools. And let's not forget the price tag you mentioned. So those are facts, and I'd be happy to send you those studies. Other facts, no matter how you slice it, the minimum wage has not kept pace with inflation. In fact, just since that wage was set at $7.25, it's already lost 10% of its purchasing power. 1 in 5 Iowa children are now food insecure. 1 in 10 people in Des Moines rely on food pantry assistance. And the vast majority of those users work full-time and still can't afford to put food on the table for their kids. This is why #1 legislative priority for the food pantry and for other hunger organizations has been increasing the minimum wage. Because nothing was done at the state level, they went to local levels to do that. And yet now we're trying to take that away. Stand Your Ground, which I spoke about in Clive, has been shown to not only be racially biased in its application, but also result in increased homicides. And yet that bill just passed the House. So my question is, these are all facts. It's verifiable data, evidence, studies have been done on laws that have been passed in other states. So are there any facts, studies, evidence that we can possibly show you that would actually change your mind on some of these issues?
I am open to seeing facts and studies, especially on the ESA issue. So, and I know the data is mixed on this, so please do send me what you have, because I would like to see it. I want to make sure we're using state resources wisely, and I want to make sure they're going to something that will provide a return on the taxpayer dollar. And if I don't see that to be the case with ESAs, then I'm not going to support them. So I do want to see the data. Please do send that to me.
One more point on your ESAs when it comes to facts too. There's also the concern that you didn't bring up, and I'm surprised someone in the crowd that's anti-ESA didn't bring up, but I will, because you have, is the potential cherry picking of good students over special needs students as well. And that's a real issue, and that is very unfair, especially to the public schools. So that is a huge issue that would have to be resolved before I'd be supportive of ESAs. Now, when it comes to the facts on the rest of the things, I hope you all know that Senator Schneider and I listen to you, and that on the other side of the fence, we know many of you don't align with us politically. That's okay, and we don't align with you politically, but we do listen to you. We do take input from you. But at the end of the day, there are certain things, and the Second Amendment is probably one of those things, that no matter what facts I provide to you or what facts you provide to me, we're probably going to continue to disagree on that. So for me, that's an issue that we can sit and debate all day long, but we're never going to come to an agreement on. But the concerns and the issues that you have given us, Matt Chapman, you and I, we just talked before we began this session today in regards to some of the concerns that you have in regards to the Stand Your Ground bill that we passed in the House. Some of those same concerns I do have too, and I'm hoping that when that bill goes to the Senate, we have an opportunity to refine those. And I do know that you've talked to Senator Schneider about that.
Hi, my name is Sarah Gary, and I'm a resident of Windsor Heights. My question is about House File 265 and Senate File 481, which compels local law enforcement to act as ICE agents and holds them liable if a person they did not detain or did not hold long enough commits a crime anytime in the future. The Polk County Sheriff has come out against this measure, saying it would interfere with law enforcement's ability to do their jobs because people will be afraid of them, not seek help from them, and not be willing to offer them information. There's a number of issues that he's very concerned are unconstitutional because ICE writs and ICE procedures don't often have room for important constitutional protections for rights of all people in this country. And then he called it just plain mean-spirited. He said, we already are doing our jobs. This pushes us far beyond that. But I also want to point out that immigrants in this state contribute $1.2 billion to our taxes. They also have $3 billion in buying power as consumers. And then just on a personal note, that my child attends Clive Elementary School, where half the students are people of color and many of them are immigrants. The children are citizens, but not necessarily their parents. And these children are terrified by the ICE raids that are happening at this time. And I can't imagine what it would be like if I had to drop my child off every day at school, and they didn't know if they would see me again because I might be picked up. People are terrified in this community. The janitor at our church talks about how afraid her friends are. They're afraid to go to work. They're afraid to go out and shop. They're afraid to bring their children to school. I would like to know where you stand on this bill and why.
Sarah, right? I ask you what that bill number is one more time?
House File 265.
And what committee is that coming out of, do you know?
I don't know if it has gone to committee yet. On the House side.
And do you know if Senate File 481 is still alive?
It's Senate File 481. It's still on the schedule for debate.
Okay. I haven't looked at that bill yet, so I don't know what's in it. I have not determined how I'll vote on that if it is brought up, and I don't know that it will be. I need to educate myself more on that issue. And any information you want to share with me, I'm happy to take. And
I would be happy to send you information because law enforcement has roundly, they have registered undecided on the bill on many levels, state and local, but they're very concerned about the measures in this bill, and they're very concerned that many parts of it are unconstitutional.
well, that matters a lot to me. I want to know especially what law enforcement thinks about this. I believe that we ought to follow the rule of law, but there are smart and not so smart ways to do that. And law enforcement is the experts at doing those things. So that means a lot to me. And as far as the whole immigrant issue goes, I'm really disgusted that immigrants appear to be targeted the way that they have been. Immigrants all of us descend from immigrants in this country. They all provide a lot of value, and they've done a lot for our society as a whole. And I think we ought to celebrate that. And we ought to embrace and hug refugees when they come into our country, because they're coming here for an opportunity at a fresh start. So personally, I don't like the demonization that's going on from some people, and I wish it would stop.
I just pulled up this bill for the first time, Sarah. This is coming out of public safety in the House. It's one that I've just laid my eyes on for the very first time. I would definitely like to talk to law enforcement about how they feel about this. But I also do know, on a personal note, that I have a friend of mine that I just very recently discovered, out of a great deal of embarrassment of himself coming to me, that he is the product of illegal immigration. And he crossed this border at age 19 from Mexico with him and his fiancée at the time. They had an 8-month-old child at the time. Since then, they have been in our community working very, very hard as productive citizens. And it wasn't until very recently that he approached me very privately and said, I'm scared. I'm scared because now I have 4 kids, 3 of which are U.S. citizens, and him and his wife and their first child are Mexican citizens, and they came here illegally. And he is literally going to bed every night afraid that ICE is going to show up on their doorstep and take them away. So this is personal. This is personal. I am very well aware of it. I wish I could share with you more about the case at the moment, but I will tell you that I'm personally involved in this because of a situation in which a young man approached me who I've known for years and approached me with embarrassment in the fact that he came to our country illegally. Now, I want to be very clear, and I'll tell you the same thing I told him. I said, you know, there's a legal path and there's an illegal path. But the stories that he has told me of what he's gone through in the last 17 years of being here illegally would blow your mind about how he's been taken advantage of, how much money it has cost him to try and at least become a legal citizen. I'm very well aware of these issues, and I'm working one-on-one with this individual to try and provide some comfort to him that he's not going to be shipped out into the night.
Please tell your colleagues.
Thank you.
Our federal government needs to take on this issue of immigration reform. They just need to do something.
Agreed.
Good morning. I appreciate you both being here. Senator Schneider, I have emailed and called and even tweeted you for quite a while now about House File 517. So my question is...
I'm sorry, tell me your name.
Sorry, I'm Shelley Schuster, and I live in Windsor Heights. I have contacted you about Stand Your Ground and how concerned I am as a mother with this legislation. I have 3 young children and 1 on the way. 2 of my children are black, and it terrifies me that 2 of them could wear a hooded sweatshirt and my other one could wear the same hooded sweatshirt, and people would fear my 2 children who have more melanin in their skin. This legislation that was unfortunately passed through the House is discriminatory, and it is proven to be extremely dangerous, not just for people of color, but for everyone. There are studies that have been done that show it significantly increases homicide rates. And before either of you think that I'm anti-gun, my husband has a permit. He has spent most of his life as a police officer. We believe in our constitutional right to bear arms, but we also believe that our beloved children, all of them, have a right to not walk around in fear in our community and anywhere in our state. So, Senator Schneider, this legislation will come across your desk. I am confident in that. And I am wondering, do you support this Stand Your Ground legislation that has been proven to significantly increase violence and homicide in communities across the country? Why or why not?
Yeah, Shelley, thank you for coming. If I haven't replied to your emails, I apologize for that. I've got, I think, 300 new emails in my inbox just from Thursday afternoon, so it's hard to get back to all of them. As far as Stand Your Ground, I support the concept of not having to retreat from a place you can lawfully be in the public in order to defend yourself if you have a reasonable belief that your life is in imminent danger. I don't know, I know there are differences in Stand Your Ground laws in different states. I don't know which studies you're referring to. I'm happy to look at them if you want to forward them to me.
I have emailed them to you.
Okay,
but I can email
thank
them
you.
Again, too.
Well, I'll look up your name because I'll still have your email, and I will look up those studies. I want to make sure we do it in a responsible way, but I do support the concept of being able to defend yourself.
Senator Schneider and Representative Taylor, In the last election, you both accepted campaign contributions from CokePack, the official bribery branch of the out-of-state billionaires Charles and David Koch. In turn, you both voted for the collective bargaining bill, which was opposed by the majority of your constituents and Iowans as a whole. At public hearing, the only people who spoke in favor of the bill were paid lobbyists from AFP, the lobbying arm of Charles and David Koch. In an unprecedented move, a member of that lobbying group joined the governor in signing that bill. This is now the subject of investigation. Representative Taylor, as chair of the Ethics Committee, will you recuse yourself from any decision that might present a conflict of interest between you and your out-of-state billionaire backers? And to both of you, will you restore public trust by 1, rejecting all future out-of-state funds, 2, resigning as chairs of ALEC, and 3, doing your best to restore the rights of the citizens victimized by these terrible pieces of legislation?
So, I'll start out by saying yes, I'm a member of ALEC. I'm also a member of NCSL, National Council of State Legislatures, which is a more left-leaning organization. I'm also a member of CSG, the Conference for State Governments, which is a more middle-of-the-road organization. There are things I like and don't like about each. There are things I agree and disagree with about each. I will continue to be a member of all of them because I learn different things from each of those different organizations. And there are some issues within ALEC that some of you would agree with, like criminal sentencing reform, occupational licensing changes, and other, I had written something else down, asset forfeiture. So just because they support a couple of things that you disagree with doesn't mean that there are also things that you would agree with. So I believe in getting a diversity of opinions and views, and for that reason I will continue to remain a member of all of those organizations.
So I can touch a little more on that too, Tyler. Thank you so much for number one, your sign, and also your question. I really appreciate that. You can hold that up if you'd like to. So, well, I give you permission to hold it high if that's how you feel. You know, I belong to a number of different organizations as well, and I think that when you elected me, I can't speak for Senator Schneider, I think that you elected an individual that does their level best to be well-rounded, to listen to all issues on all sides of a subject matter. I signed up for ALEC my very first year of my legislative session 5 years ago, because not knowing the organization at all, what I did know and what enticed me was these three premises. And they say it right on the website. If any of you have not been to the website, go to ALEC.org and check it out. Here's what you don't know about ALEC. Is outside of the state of Iowa, it's a bipartisan organization.
No.
No, you can laugh all you want.
Nope.
But I've been to every conference from 5 years ago to now. I think I've skipped a couple because I was in a couple of other conferences as well. And there's Democrats and Republicans that come. But in Iowa, what you need to know is that several years ago that the Democratic leadership told the Democratic members that you will not be a member of ALEC, period. That you will not join it. Well, before you say good, you also need to make sure that you check it out. You check it out for yourself. I'm not here to defend it, advocate for it. I'm just telling you that particular organization and what brought me to them was simply this. They believed in limited government, free markets, and federalism. And those three things aligned with me. Now, just like Senator Schneider, what you also need to know is that I also am a member of NCSL, which is the National Council for State Legislatures, which most of the Democrats belong to. And I think it's important that I also belong to that as well because it's pretty left-leaning. Council for State Governments, it is a bipartisan organization that I belong to and have belonged to for 5 years and chair a couple of their committees as well. I also am the product of two of their fellowships. One is called BUILD, which is a Midwest fellowship, in which there's only 48 people selected nationwide every year to be able to, that's told, I'm sorry. BUILD is Midwest legislatures, people in a bipartisan way that have got to be recommended in a bipartisan way that are up-and-coming leaders. They're recommended to go to that. You have to be recommended by 3 of your peers, most of which you're recommended by your minority members more than your majority members. I also belong to another organization called RSG, which is Reforming State Governments. It's an organization out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Millbank Memorial Fund is who funds that. Very left-leaning organization. I also have a high fuel saver card, if you want to know that. I also belong to another organization called ASE, which is the Automotive Service and Excellence Program. I'm an ASE certified diesel technician. Don't hold that against me. I also belong to Farm Bureau. I also belong to the Iowa Honey Producers Association. These are all different conferences that I go to and that we go to every year to listen to our peers across the table in a bipartisan way to see what is the very best policies that we can bring back to our state and best ideas and advocate for you. I think it's incredibly important that you have a well-rounded legislator that represents you at the Capitol that hears both sides. Whether we agree with it or not, we hear both sides and we try and advocate from both sides. And I think that over the last 5 years, I think that you've seen that I have busted my tail on both sides of the aisle to advocate for you. Medical cannabis is a perfect example of that. So for you to accuse me of not advocating for you because I belong to an organization that you're probably not even well aware of what they stand for, because the vast majority of the folks that I've talked to about ALEC haven't even been to the website. That's offensive to me. And I say back to you, sir, shame on you.
Shame on you.
Hey, excuse us. We have visited the website.
You have. What questions do you have?
Right here.
What questions do you have?
You never answered the question.
You have to have a microphone to ask the question, please.
We all accept out-of-state funds. If you're asking about the fund, first of all, ALEC is not an organization that it's not a nonprofit. Or it's a nonprofit organization. It has never cut me a check for anything. I believe, if I recall, I think I've received one Coke Pack check for $500 at one point in time.
Senator Schneider, what about you?
Sir, wait.
Well, I want to hear what he has to say.
Please, we have a rule. You have to have the microphone. We have a lady that has the microphone. We would like everybody's cooperation, please. I know you've got passion.
Well, I also forgot, just in all transparency, I do listen to NPR in the morning and I listen to Rush Limbaugh in the afternoon, and they both piss me off. Okay? That's the kind of individual that you have representing you. As far as recusing myself about an ethics investigation, first of all, you need to understand that there is an ethics investigation going on right now in which I can't talk publicly about. But I think that once that committee is held and you understand the dynamics of it, I think that you're going to be, it's going to be very transparent, the fact that if I feel as though I have a conflict of interest, no different than any other piece of legislation, that I will recuse myself.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Goodnow, and I'm a business analyst by profession. My job is to analyze documents that describe solutions to business problems. I work with stakeholders trying to find the best solutions we can for all manner of problems. Your association with ALEC indicates that your focus is on the businesses that pay into ALEC to pass laws that allow them to profit more while you receive so-called scholarships. This is the part that really gets me. Businesses pay into ALEC, you get scholarships, meanwhile you're sitting in conference rooms talking about bills that end up in our state legislators, in our state legislatures. I hold here 4 documents from the Legislative Information Office that clearly state your job is to serve the constituents, not businesses. For example, I have one called, "What are your legislators?" First line says, an Iowa legislator is someone who has many roles: lawmaker, a representative of constituents' interests, and an overseer of state citizen interests. No mention of business. Your oath of office says that you are to uphold the Constitution of Iowa and perform your duties faithfully and impartially. Further, your duties are defined in a section called representation. serving constituents living in each district, and functioning as a liaison between citizens and government. Again, no mention of business. The organizational chart, and I will show you. If I can get to it. Organizational chart. Who's at the top? Citizens. We are your boss. So I get concerned when you tell me we may disagree, because we are your bosses. Then we learn you're hosts of an exclusive ALEC-funded breakfast and collecting money from donor companies to continue to produce more crappy bills that stomp on our rights as fully fledged citizens of Iowa. Your integrity is on the line.
Heather, we need to get to the questions.
I'm
30
almost
seconds
there.
each. Thank you very much.
Given the above, how do you justify your votes in this session? Explain our role in the legislative process. If ALEC has been paying you to vote their way, you've lost our trust. Will you restore public trust by rejecting all out-of-state funds, resigning as co-chairs of ALEC, and doing your best to restore the rights of the citizens victimized by these pieces of legislation?
Please mention that you.
I'm from Waukee.
I think I answered that question when Tyler asked his. I join multiple organizations because I want a diversity of opinions and a diversity of input. I have multiple interests, as do my constituents. I think it behooves me to get as much information about as many different policies and issues as I can, especially as they relate to the roles I play in the legislature on the appropriations, judiciary, and state government and international relations committees. Now, I understand constituents are the boss, and I know that because I run for election, and I run for re-election, and I have to appeal to the citizens to get elected. And, you know, the fact of the matter is, there will be times when there are disagreements with some of my constituents. Even though you're all my bosses, if you could help me find a way to make everybody happy with every decision 100% of the time, then there would never be any problem. But it's just human nature to have disagreements on certain issues. Even where we disagree, I will always listen to you. I will always take whatever information you want to give me, and I will always be happy to explain why I vote the way I do on any particular bill.
I don't think I have anything else to add. If you're asking me if I'm going to resign myself as the co-chair of ALEC, I have no intention of doing that. Nor do I have any intention of resigning myself from the leadership positions that I have in the Council for State Government, from the reforming state groups, from ALEC, from Farm Bureau, from the Iowa Honey Producers Association. See, I'm also a constituent too, and I think that I think it's my job to be a responsible elected official for you, a well-rounded individual that gets ideas and perspectives from all angles. And, you know, the unfortunate part about politics that we have today is become so one-sided that Democrats and Republicans can't talk across the aisle, agree to disagree, and find the common grounds that we have. You dislike me just because I have an R after my name. And you assume that I dislike you just because I have a D after my name.
Don't assume that.
That is not how politics should work.
My name is David Leonard. I'm from Waukee. Rob, I think this was alluded to, but maybe you didn't answer. Did you co-host a breakfast and policy discussion event with AFB? And if so, does that not present a conflict of interest in the ethics investigation into the Iowa director of AFB?
Woo! I appreciate you asking that, David. I did not. I attended that event. That was not an AFP event. It was an ALEC event, and AFP was one of the sponsors of the event. But I did attend an event. Yes.
You didn't co-host.
I believe that myself, Greg Forstall, and Senator Schneider were listed as chairs on the invitation, as I recall. You know how that?
It was up right there.
Well, read it. Go ahead and read it. No, I'm not done with David yet. Good, all right. So to your question, David, if in this ethics investigation it looks as though that is a conflict of interest for me, because remember I can't talk about that particular investigation. It has to be confidential right now, and that's under the ethics rules. If I feel that there's a conflict of interest there, and by the way, if I get counsel, and one of the things that folks don't know about the ethics committee is it is a nonpartisan committee that's made up of 3 Democrats and 3 Republicans, that if we decide that there is a conflict there, if we as a committee decide there's a conflict there, I will recuse myself.
Okay, good. A little more about conflict of interest. Maybe you could just speak to the issue of what your rules are. I keep wondering about this Rep. Matt Winchell, who is pushing all of these wacky gun law changes. He owns a gun shop. He sells guns and he repairs guns. If all of these gun laws go through, he's bound to sell more guns and repair more guns, and I don't know how that is not a conflict of interest.
Your point's well taken, David. The issue that we have many times at the legislature, and we have to deal with this on many other issues besides guns. When it comes to a conflict of interest, as an individual, what we have to look at anytime an issue comes up, if you're a farmer, for example, and you vote for a farm bill, is that a conflict of interest? If you're a teacher and you vote for or against a teacher bill, is that a conflict of interest? The way that I look at it as an individual legislator is that if I have a bill that comes forward in which I can directly, and it says very specifically in the rules, directly have a financial gain in that, that's a bill that, for me, I would probably recuse myself of. But that's me as your legislator. I can't tell you what Matt Winchell thinks or does. I'm not him. But I will tell you in all transparency, I think there's going to be a bill coming up in the very near future on some sweeping changes on our alcohol laws. And I think many of you in this room know that my wife and I bought an old winery in Osceola that hopefully in the future we're going to convert to a distillery. If that bill comes to the House floor, I'll recuse myself of that vote. Because right now I will not gain financially from that, but in the future, as an individual legislator, I think potentially there could be a conflict of interest there for me because I potentially could have a financial gain in the future based upon that law coming through. So as an individual legislator, those are the decisions that we have to make every time we push the button. And I can't speak for Matt, but I can tell you at least how I look at it as an individual legislator every time a bill comes through, is if there's a direct financial gain for me, I do my level best to recuse myself if there's a direct financial gain for me. That's my job.
Good morning, Kimberly Hutt from Waukee. I have a handout as well. I have a copy of the invitation from Tuesday. It says you are invited to American Legislative Exchange Council membership breakfast and policy discussion with ALEC Chief Economist Jonathan Williams. It discussed on the invitation about discussion of policy, and it also says it's hosted by ALEC board members, Speaker Linda Upmeyer and Representative Don Pettengill, and ALEC State Chairs, Senator Schneider, Representative Taylors, and Forstall. Co-hosted with Americans for Prosperity, Iowans for Tax Relief, and Public Interest Institute. Being that this was a private event and you were discussing policy, do you believe that this actually was a lobbying event instead of a private event? So if it was a policy discussion, it would normally be lobbying or being under at the Capitol where the public could be observing and hearing the discussion. You say it's an organization, it is a nonprofit, but it is very much because there is memberships and sponsorships, it's been able to not be a for-profit because it's taking money from the corporations and giving you guys a discount for scholarships for your membership, where businesses are sitting at the same table as representatives and senators discussing policy where no citizens are able to be at that table as well and hear these discussions. I have a question as your state chairs of ALEC, why you think that this is a good thing for the citizens, your voters in Dallas County or in our districts here.
And Kimberly, there are all kinds of groups that have
I'm talking specifically about ALEC. I want to talk about ALEC.
I'm answering that question. There are all kinds of groups that have legislative breakfasts and coffees and lunches and dinners at the Capitol and outside of the Capitol that they invite legislators to go to that are the same thing as this. They talk about their legislative priorities. They talk about issues that are important to them. They all have to follow ethics and campaign disclosure rules, and this is no different from any one of those. And if you go to the social calendar, if you Google legislative social calendar, you can see a list of all those things, all those breakfasts and events that come up on a weekly basis.
And the only other thing that I would add, and I honestly don't want you to take this in a snarky way. It might sound it, I don't mean to. If you're curious about what ALEC is about, you can join it. It's $50 a year, and I would invite you to do so.
Yeah, do we get money?
Could we have gone to that event? And I know I'm not on the microphone.
You could have.
You could have. Yeah, as a matter of fact, there was also a $10 fee for you to go and attend too. So.
You need to get on that later.
Thank you both for coming today. My name is Kelly. I'm a citizen of Waukee, and you're both my senator representative. Thank you for your time today. I want to talk about another issue moving through the legislature right now, which is some pretty significant serious reforms to our state workers' compensation laws that pretty negatively affect Iowa workers, and I'd like to hear both of your positions on that issue today.
Sure, Kelly. There are a few changes that I have heard people consistently say they would like to have made to them. One has to do with treating shoulder injury as a part of the body as a whole as opposed to a scheduled member. Second is making a change to the burden of proof required to show that there is an injury. And the third is the retirement age. And the bill was set at 67, or the maximum age at which one could get benefits was set at 67. I support making changes to all three of those issues. And the groups that I've heard from with concerns about the bill have narrowed their concerns to those three issues. So I would be in support of making those changes to the bill.
I'm going to be very simple. I'm a no on the bill.
Thank you, and I'm not going to get up. I kind of got a goofy leg, but I want to give you guys a little love. Matt Chapman from Waukee, Iowa. You guys know me well. The bee thing. 2 years ago, none of my tomatoes flowered. So yes, I agree with you on that. I agree with you on that. And I would also ask you, not to answer this, but the pesticides effect on the bees.
Yeah, the neonicotinoids. That's something.
And you're aware of that, I'm sure. And I want to give some love to Senator Schneider. Let's see, make sure I get this right.
I feel the love, Matt.
Okay, good deal. Yeah, you had a meeting on a racial profiling study, and you met with a bunch of our friends from the NAACP. And at the end of the meeting, and I'll quote you, you said, "I've learned more about racial profiling in the last 45 minutes than I've learned my whole life." You know, and that's awesome. I want you to know a lot of folks who grew up and have lived, or still live, in difficult circumstances feel they don't get heard very often, so thank you. And I'm going to beat you up. House File 517, just go back to that. The big gun bill. Now, I've lost 2 family members from guns, violence. And I have some concerns. I have some concerns with the open carry and concealed carry and where you can do that. if this bill goes through, and I'm going to ask you to explain this, Mr. Taylor, what areas are exempt, and just because my concern would be a forum like this, some men come in, or some women, with long guns and line the walls. And I think that would be pretty bad for our political discourse. I think it would be intimidating. And I have concerns as far as the polls, too, when we're going to vote, if they would be allowed to do that. Yeah, I just think it would have a bad effect. But we can't yell fire in a theater, you know. And so I think a well-regulated militia, I think it's okay to look at maybe putting some restrictions, because I mean, you can have guns in your home, you can go to a range, you can go hunting. Yeah. So, and let's see, what else? Oh, and I want to give you an example that happened up in Michigan just recently. 2 men entered a police station, one wearing a mask, body armor, a short barrel rifle, and a semi-automatic pistol. And they did it because they wanted to audit the police and make sure they were enforcing the laws, their right to do that, basically. And the police drew on them and said, get down on the ground. And luckily it didn't escalate into they didn't shoot him.
We'd really like to pause on the story time and get to specific questions.
I'm almost done.
Thank you very much.
But they, okay, so anyway. So, 2 men in Michigan entered a police station, one wearing a mask and body armor, a short barrel rifle and a semi-automatic pistol. The police drew on them, told them to get on the ground, and luckily it didn't escalate. And now they have a very good chance of either just walking away or being charged with a misdemeanor and maybe lose their guns. That's the only thing that's going to happen. So they went into a police station armed and combat ready and will get the equivalent of a traffic ticket. And to a lot of this, that's madness. So I just would like you guys to address that if you could. Thank you.
Actually, Matt, I got your letter, and I promise you that I will read it and your concerns. In regards to where you can carry, I think that is going to be refined in the Senate, I hope. I will tell you there's a great deal of concern in the bill that as we passed it in the House in regards to being able to conceal carry at the Capitol. And that was also shared in a bipartisan way. I will tell you that as the bill reads right now, if the bill does come through as it sets, at least at the Capitol, if you're a concealed carry permit owner, when you're checked in at the Capitol, you have to show your concealed carry permit. Keep in mind, this is the bill. This is not. I did vote for it, so thanks for that. One of the suggestions that I made was once the bill would become law, then it becomes a rulemaking process. One of the suggestions that I made, because I voiced concern about people being able to carry in public buildings. By the way, I got a great deal of feedback from our community colleges, also from our region institutions, about how the original bill read. That information, or that part of the bill was stripped out. But one of the suggestions that I gave to Representative Winchell before we passed this bill is I said, if we're going to conceal carry at the Capitol, number one, I have great concerns on that. But number two, if we are going to do that, if someone has to walk into the Capitol and provide their concealed carry permit before they can proceed, then my suggestion is also to identify that individual with something to identify them, not only citizens carrying, but also elected officials carrying, that they're carrying. I think that is, at minimum, a common sense process in which we need to go through so that all law enforcement officers in the Capitol have at least know who is carrying and who is not. So this bill right now is far from done. It did pass out of the House. I am relying heavily upon my Senate colleagues to refine it more. I have voiced some of the same concerns, and I've also conveyed many of the concerns that you all have sent to us as letters on to my senators, and hoping that we can further refine and make this bill better.
Could you address the exempt areas, and if my perception of, could they come in here, like if this bill comes through the Senate just like it is, could the folks come in with long guns and sit here in a public forum, and when we go to vote, could they be there at the polling place?
I think that question is still out there because there's a concern about whether or not this bill would currently prevent cities and municipalities from enforcing their current code.
So moving on, we have room for one more question, and then we will be taking an update from our Dallas County Supervisor, Mark Hansen. And the last question?
Thank you. Anthony Pudlow, citizen of Waukee here, and also a healthcare professional. Thank you, Rob and Charles. I always appreciate your comments here in these forums. My quick question, I guess, as a healthcare professional, still very much concerned about these three private entities, the managed care organizations handling our Medicaid budget, and it's very frustrating to see them approve or agree to a contract with the state and then consistently coming back asking for more money. I just would like to hear your thoughts on, where does the legislature really have authority here to get back at what these MCOs are supposed to be doing and doing their job right?
2 weeks ago, less than 2 weeks ago, I guess, a week and a half ago, the Health and Human Services Budget Subcommittee met, and both House and Senate met with the three MCOs. And to be very frank with you, we got a lot of fluff, and I got angry. And at the end of that meeting, I made this statement. I said, "Why in the hell does it take a call from a legislator to one of the MCOs or to the department before these folks are getting paid or before our citizens are getting covered?" I got very angry. I also asked them within this first year, how much money have they lost? They weren't sure till I pushed them hard. And I said, just give me a rough guess. Between the three MCOs in the first year, they've lost $480 million. Now, if the writing isn't on the wall on what's going on with MCOs, that day it became glaringly transparent in a very nonpartisan way what's going on. What's happening with the MCOs right now, in my mind, is unacceptable. We are putting our citizens at risk. We're putting our organizations that support our citizens at risk. I've placed 2 calls now to the department and to one MCO to investigate why our folks are not getting paid and why our individuals are not getting covered. So unfortunately, I don't have a solution for this yet, but what I do know is the current structure is not working in the fashion that I was promised as a legislator, and we definitely have to do something.
Thank
you. Anthony, if there's a specific issue you're having with them, I know you're a pharmacist, and if there's a specific issue you're having or a problem you're having with any one of them and getting reimbursed, please let me know. I mean, we need to hold their feet to the fire. And we've got a review committee set up that meets twice a year, every year, to review the progress of what's being made. And is that the one you're on, Rod? Mm-hmm. And with Representative Taylor on that, I know that there's oversight and accountability, and we need to make sure they're doing what they said they would do.
Well, that concludes our question and answer session with our legislators. Thank you very much, State Senator Charles Schneider and Representative Taylor. We are going to close this event at 11 o'clock, so at this time we will hear a short update from our Dallas County Supervisor, Mark Hansen.
And I never got my question answered respectfully, Mr. Taylor.
And respectfully, I would just like to say that the Waukee Area Chamber of Commerce is very happy to host you here today. And if you have additional questions, you can ask them after the event is over. Thank you very much.
Who are you?
Wow.
Thank you very much. I apologize that I did ask, and I was granted 5 minutes to give a brief update on Dallas County and what's going on in the county. And so to try to work as quickly as I can, I brought some charts, and the charts will remain in the room when we're done. We do a comparative analysis against Potawatomi, Dubuque, Story, Warren, where Dallas taxes are. So this is who receives property tax dollars. The state average for schools is 41.5%. In Dallas County, about 47.7% goes to schools. Cities, state average 28.9, In Dallas, 33.8. Counties, the state average is 22.20. In Dallas, it's 12.8. And then you've got community colleges, hospitals, assessors, townships, ag extension, and miscellaneous. That would add up to 100% if the math is good. Here's the historical levy rates for Dallas County. I can show that in 2008, the total levy rate was 9.71. That's the combined rural and urban levy. Today it's 7.85%. That number, we are the lowest percentage county receiver of property tax dollar, but we're still able to get the work done. We don't have local option sales tax, and we don't receive any gaming tax, and that's a little different from some of the other counties as far as the numbers go.
Black on a blue background.
This one is what's of importance today. This is just our public safety and legal services. In 16, we spent $9.7 million. Re-estimated for this year, it's $11.5 million. Expected for next year is $12.6 million. These dollar increases are predominantly related to the costs associated with us outsourcing the prisoners to other counties by us not having our own facility to house our own prison population. From the Des Moines Register, and I do have to put my glasses on for this. To give you an idea on the actual numbers there, Dallas County has spent $237,000 over the last 6 months transporting prisoners to nearby county jails. And that doesn't include the transportation costs and the time of the deputies going off site and not being able to respond. There will be a bond issue that is going to be put before the voters once again, May the 2nd. And the issue is down here, it's all just property tax dollars. If the bond issue was to pass, there's over $600 million of tax increment financing dollars. They must pay into debt service, just like the property tax payer does. This is a big number that would assist the property tax payers to offset the cost of getting this facility built. And lastly, I'll just show the picture. We are going to have a public hearing Tuesday night at the Waukee Community Center. Starts at 6:30. We'd love you to come. If you can't come, I've got some flyers right here with the details. What the costs are. Very important to understand. If you're a person with a $200,000 assessed value would have to pay an estimated $31 in property taxes a year to pay for this facility that the picture's up for. But the tax levy will likely return to today's rate in 2 years or 3 years, as long as the county doesn't take on any additional debt. And what that means is there might be an increase on the debt service levy for a 2 to 3 year period, but the courthouse debt will be going away and our lagoon debt will be going away, so it'll revert back to what the debt service is today. I tried to show on the front end that we're a low tax county, but we do need your help to get this facility built. It's the last one that will solve many of the issues we've got with the overcrowding situation. So you're welcome to come to the public hearing. We'd love to have you. Tuesday night, 6:30, Waukee Community Center. Yo, DallasCountyVote.com. DallasCountyVote.com. There's in fact, on the handout here, on the handout here, and this is a chart on the back of this one, but it's also on the ones here. This was done by the Samuels Group. This basically shows if the county does nothing, if we continue to do what we're doing now by outsourcing, it will cost you more, taxpayers, in 2 to 3 years just in your property tax levy than it would be to do the bond and pay the bond off. So the financials, I'm here to present factual information to you. We've kind of made some missteps over time and maybe not shared it as clearly as we could have explained in the past. But it's a real issue and it's a real cost to you. And it's a public safety issue for all of us. That's right. So we'd love to have your support May the 2nd.
Thank you to our Dallas County Supervisor Mark Hansen for sharing that information. Thanks again to our legislators. We appreciate all of you being here today to come out and have the opportunity to speak to the legislators. The Waukee Area Chamber of Commerce Government Affairs Committee puts this event on for our Waukee Chamber members and residents at no cost. The Chamber is a nonprofit organization made up of businesses, organizations, and individuals dedicated to promoting growth and prosperity in our local economy. We do host this coffee 3 times during session as an opportunity to connect with legislators. Obviously, the event has concluded today, so if you do have additional questions, we definitely welcome you to email your legislators or contact them following. But the event location will be closed at 11:30 today, so if our legislators decide to stay after, you can have time to follow up with additional questions. Absolutely. But thank you so much all for taking the time to be here, and we hope you have a great weekend. Thanks.